Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Dr. Austin Sam George, Commissioner for Information and Rivers, joins us this morning to at least give us some perspective on the helicopters story. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
We heard the officials of the customs say, look, these equipments, they came in without the relevant papers and they went on and on. What happened?
Anyway, that's complete falsehood, a blatant lie. You know, you would expect that public institutions at least should have some level of integrity. You know, I have here before me a file full of correspondences between the Rivers State government and the National Security Advisor, the President, and the Customs itself. In fact, there are documentations that originated from the CBN. You see, it's very important to understand this transaction in its context. The Rotimi Amaechi administration bought these helicopters in 2012. They got a waiver to bring it in 2013. They didn't bring it in until, you know, the waivers lapsed. Now, when the Nyesom Wike administration came on board in 2015, you know, they didn't get any handover notes at all, not a single scrap of paper. In fact, of all the 36 states in this country, it was only the Rotimi Amaechi administration that did not hand over a single scrap of paper to the successor administration. And so we didn't even know about this until in July 2015, when Caverton, which you know is an aviation company, alerted the governor and said, look, the Rivers State government has such assets abroad, and that they run the risk of being confiscated by the State Department in the U.S.
Was that when you got these tons of documents you spoke about?
Oh, yes. You know, so the governor initiated a range of correspondences. He wrote to the president, you know, and said, look, we wanted to bring these things in. He wrote to the relevant agencies, and they said, okay, bring these things in. In fact, in all of the range of correspondences, the custom was totally in the picture. They knew. In fact, if they unveil the aircrafts, you'll see that, you know, Rivers State, you know, initials are clearly written on it. In all the correspondences, you know, you will see that the custom was clearly aware. They were part of the correspondences. For instance, this is the letter from Caverton. You know, this is the letter he wrote, you know, asking for the revalidation of the waivers that the Amaechi administration didn't use.
One is really concerned, though, because when you say there isn't any proper handover to your administration of Mr. Wike, that does raise a lot of questions, because you could have other instances of other purchases that were made in the past and it's been slammed on your face. How do you respond to that?
Gimba, that's exactly correct. You see, one of the tragedies of our politics in this country is that we seem to forget that the handover notes that an administration gets to give to the successor administration is not just a ceremony, it's not just a range of documents. It's in fact a very important part of public accountability. That administration received over 3 trillion naira in 8 years, and they did not give a single account. In fact, our own information is that 2 weeks to the handover itself, Mr. Rotimi Amaechi.
No, they must have given you some kind of information. I mean, to hand over. The government doesn't change hands like that.
They completely forbade even the permanent secretaries from handing over documents, you know, to the successor administration. What they did was to burn some of the most important sensitive documents. They made a bonfire of those documents by midnight, 2 weeks to hand over, and the fellows simply left the government house. Now, the point about these helicopters is that they were purportedly purchased for aerial surveillance. They have a great deal of military capabilities. In fact, I remember sitting right here on this couch, you know, as a private citizen, calling for the resignation of Rotimi Amaechi in 2012 when I got to know about the purchase of these things. Because in my private capacity as an individual, I was very concerned about such a transaction, because it seemed to me that $27 million, you know, $900,000, you know, would have been used to create jobs for young people. He used it for this kind of, for this kind of transaction, and he never imported it. He allowed the waiver that was granted by the federal government to lapse. In his earlier statement, Mr. Rotimi Amaechi said, you know, $15 million was contributed by the federal authorities, but that the federal authorities frustrated, you know, the importation of the materials. How could you contribute $15 million and yet frustrate the importation of such a matter? It doesn't make sense.
Did they come with end user certificate? Because customs says no. It didn't come with any such.
No, you know, typically with this kind of transactions, what happens is that, you know, you import, and when it comes in, there is a whole process to get end user certification. You can't get certification until you get waivers. Now, when the waivers were granted in 2013, the Rotimi Amaechi administration didn't use the waivers at all. When the Wike administration came in, we now formally applied. We applied to the National Security Advisor. We applied to the customs. We applied directly to the president, applying for waivers. These waivers were never given. In fact, our suspicion
how
is
long
that
ago was this?
This was between July 2015 to July 2015 up to March 2016. In fact, it was in March 2016 that, out of frustration, the Wike administration wrote directly to the Chief of Air Staff to say, take custody of this aircraft. And
would you have been able to clear these the aircraft if they were, for instance, commercial?
No, they were not commercial.
I know, if they were commercial, would you have cleared them? Because one of the reasons why you're not looking to clear this is because it's a military hardware which you necessarily don't need.
No, actually what happened was, you know, they ordered for these aircrafts to use them for aerial surveillance, to try to track criminals, you know, involved in pipeline vandalism. That was the reason they used, you know, this much money to import these aircrafts. They have very strong military capabilities. They have night vision capabilities. You know, they are armored, and they were supposed to be used in military circumstances. You know, so they were never used, you know, going to be used for commercial purposes anyway. So what we were looking for was that, okay, instead of allow this kind of transaction to go to waste, we are talking about close to 10 billion naira here. You know, why don't we bring them in and then put them to some use? But the waivers that we were seeking across the board, with the customs, with the CBN, with the National Security Advisor, with the president himself, and I have the original documentation here, those waivers were never granted. Out of frustration, in March 2016, the Rivers State government wrote to the National Security Advisor and said, we are handing over custody of these aircrafts to the Nigerian Air Force. On the 3rd of November 2016, we got reply accepting to receive these aircrafts by the Chief Air Force, Chief of Air Force Staff. Now the point is that how could, in all of these transactions that the Customs Service was aware of, how could they, only yesterday or 2 days ago, be the institution to be handing over such assets to the NFA? Okay. In fact, what we suspect is that they are politicizing this, and this is very sad, because how could they? I have all the documents that show that Customs was aware of this.
Let's get some reaction on this matter. Mark,
is it like it's a former special assistant?
Who?
You.